Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, good business, protecting wildlife and forests in Sumatra. Presented by Jan Vertefeuille and Alexander Nicolas of World Wildlife Fund. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for joining us here today. Over to you, Jan.
Thanks so much, Rob. So Alexander and I work in the wildlife team at World Wildlife Fund, and we're going to share with you one of our favorite projects. Next slide, Alexander. So it's really great to be here with you today, and I'd like to give a quick shout out to one of Daily Dose's most loyal fans, Anne, who tunes in just about every day from Grand Manan Island in New Brunswick, Canada. So hi, Anne, and hi, everyone. Now, you may think that everyone at a conservation organization is a scientist, but my background is actually journalism and communications, and I've parlayed those skills at WWF to focus on advocacy and campaigns to push for conservation wins on the global level. So I've been with WWF for more than 20 years and have led a number of our international advocacy campaigns. But this today, the project we're going to be talking about is one of my all-time favorites in Sumatra. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexander to introduce himself, and we're going to actually turn off our video cameras while we're talking because we've got some videos to show with you today and we don't want to hog the bandwidth. So over to you, Alexander.
Thanks, Jan, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. My name is Alexander Nicolas. I am a Senior Program Officer on the Wildlife Conservation Team with WWF. In my role, I focus on supporting strategic communications and campaign efforts to connect and engage with people and partners to drive our wildlife conservation work forward. So interestingly, to Jan's point, my background is actually in ecology and conservation science. So it's abundantly clear that conservation calls upon many a diverse skill set. I've been with WWF for the past 7 years, and this project is truly one of my favorite programs that I have gotten to support and be a part of, since it's really at the intersection and heart of so many critical efforts and types of work that we value so much when it comes to conservation. So I'll punt it back to you, Jan, to continue.
Thanks, Alexander. So a bit about World Wildlife Fund. We are the world's largest conservation organization. We're on the ground in nearly 100 countries. So that means delivering field projects, working on government engagement, corporate and policy work, a wide variety of efforts. Next slide. And I mentioned that we both work on the wildlife team. And you might ask, isn't everyone at World Wildlife Fund on the wildlife team? So we've been around since 1961, and we did start out with a singular focus, and that was to ensure the survival of endangered species in the wild. In fact, we started specifically to try to save the black rhino in Africa, which I'm very happy to say is still with us. But over the last 60 plus years, we've grown to focus on 6 areas that are broader than just wildlife to protect nature and the planet. Because you can't conserve species without protecting the places they live, and you can't protect the places they live without working on the threats to those places, like climate change and our agricultural system. And we've come to see that people must be at the heart of everything we do. Communities really need to benefit from conservation to have lasting impact. Next slide. Of course, everything we do ultimately benefits some of the world's most endangered species. And the most threatened species in the world often need more than just protecting their habitat. They may need efforts to protect them from poaching or stopping the black market demand for their body parts like ivory and skins. And that's where our work on the wildlife team is often focused. So that's just a quick overview of our work and of us. And I'm going to turn it back to Alexander to start diving into the work that we're here to share with you today in a very special place in Sumatra.
Thanks, Jan. So I'm going to dive now, taking you to the country of Indonesia and why it's really so unique of a place when it comes to nature and biodiversity. It's a country that is blessed with unique and rich biodiversity that really serves as the backbone for the lives of millions of people and hundreds of ethnic groups within the country's territory. The Southeast Asian island of Sumatra, which is located on the equator, is home to some of the world's most diverse rainforests. It covers nearly 500,000 square kilometers, making it the 6th largest island in the world. Sumatra is home to 50 million people, making it the world's most populous island, fourth most populous island. The lush rainforests of Sumatra are unlike any other place on Earth. It holds some of the richest tropical forests that give shelter to many rare species and provide the livelihoods for millions of people. There's more than 15,000 known plants in their forests. It's home to over 200 mammal species, over 500 bird species, and it's really rich in freshwater resources as well. These massive rivers cut across the landscape and really provide the lifelines for this island, offering transport and providing freshwater needs and resources for the island's people. So protecting these forests and the amazing biodiversity that one finds here is a priority for WWF. And we've been working with local partners in Sumatra to protect the island's remaining forests and habitats. But these magnificent creatures and places are disappearing as their forest homes are rapidly being cut down to make way for palm oil plantations, or they're destroyed for commercial and illegal logging. About 12 million hectares of forest on Sumatra have been cleared in the past 22 years, and that's a loss of nearly 50% of that forest cover, making it now a deforestation hotspot. And while Indonesia is home to approximately 3% of the world's forests, deforestation in this region represents over a third of the total global carbon emissions from deforestation and land degradation. So looking a little bit more closely at these specific threats, like agriculture, paper production, and illegal forest clearing, they have led and have been the reason to one of the highest deforestation rates in the world. So you can see here just some photo examples of that when you experience that being on the ground in Sumatra. It's a very visceral and just stunning feeling. It's very tangible to see how prevalent and pervasive these threats are in actuality. So like you can see in that middle photo, some palm oil fruits, forest clearing, logging trucks. The threats are very real and they literally stretch for miles. In Sumatra, the vast wealth of natural resources have attracted large-scale international and extractive industries for things like precious hardwoods, minerals, to palm oil, rubber, coal. And more than half of all packaged products Americans consume contain palm oil. And you might even be surprised about how many things it's found in. It's found in things like lipstick, soaps, chocolate, detergents, and even ice cream and many other products. But in addition to these threats, another big threat is wildlife trade. It's a major problem in this region too. Rampant poaching facilitated by the growing number of this infrastructure of these roads and these logging trails, it poses a grave threat to Sumatra's endangered species like tigers and rhinos. And there's only about an estimated 600 Sumatran tigers believed to be left in the wild. Tigers are hunted for their skins, rhinos are killed for their horns, and orangutans are taken from the wild for the entertainment and tourism trade. And so now we come to focus on the forest of 30 Hills, which is in the heart of Sumatra. And it's a forest which, upon its doorstep, are these cleared forests and these plantations that literally stretch for these miles all the way up to its doorstep. But why is this forest so special? I mean, other than the obvious reasons when you actually see it in person and just how grand it is and the wild splendor that it is, it's a forest that holds tremendous diversity and opportunity. It is very likely the last viable remaining block of lowland forest in central Sumatra, and the last stronghold for viable habitat for 3 critically endangered species, those being Sumatran tigers, Sumatran elephants, and Sumatran orangutans, along with so many more wildlife species. And so you can see on the slide just some of these impactful statistics speaking to just some of those numbers. So species like these guys are a big reason as to why this place is so unique and biodiverse and rich in its wildlife species. This is the only place where tigers, orangutans, and elephants live together in the world. There are an estimated 170 orangutans in this forest, at least 120 elephants, and 30 tigers. But there's also other species like sun bears, that animal that you see in the bottom left photo, that's a tapir. There's animals like clouded leopards, golden cats, and so much more. It really is a home to so many species of wildlife. But the forest here is also full of non-timber forest products and other forest resources. So some of those things are like medicinal plants, herbs and spices, resins, and dyes that are sought after overseas. Another such resource is carbon. This is a very rich, carbon-rich forest. Forests play a critical role in mitigating climate change because they act as what is known as a carbon sink, which essentially means that they soak up carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that otherwise would be free in the atmosphere, contributing to ongoing changes in climate patterns. But as forests are destroyed and degraded, such as through things like forest fires, or they're cleared for agriculture, a sustainable logging for timber, this impacts people's livelihoods and it threatens a wide range of plant and animal species, as it then undermines the important carbon sink function of forests. And when those forests are lost, they emit carbon instead of absorbing that carbon. And it's estimated that 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions are the result of deforestation. So forests are disappearing at an alarming rate. It's estimated that 18.7 million acres of forest are lost annually, and that's equivalent to 27 soccer fields every minute. This forest is also home to two indigenous tribes, known as the Orang and the Talangmamak people. These are two tribes of forest-dwelling indigenous peoples that live in the forest, and they are trying to hold on to their forest-dependent lives here. The Talangmamak people have been in central Sumatra for centuries, living off of the forest's honey, off of the forest's native fruits, the bearded pigs, and the abundant medicinal plants. The population is roughly around 200 individuals in their village, which is made up of around 54 households. So now I'm going to turn it back to Jan to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing there.
Thanks, Alexander. So imagine being a conservationist who's been working desperately to protect this place for years, lobbying the government of Indonesia to take this last big block of rainforest and make it part of the adjacent national park, because there is a park in the center of this landscape, but it doesn't cover all of the forest. But sadly, Indonesia is a poor country, and one of their biggest assets is their vast forest area, which they divide up into concessions that are licensed out to commercial companies for money. They're hesitant to give up a revenue source as significant as logging and clearing the forest. And deforestation is sadly something of a way of life for both big companies and poor farmers alike. They all conduct slash and burn land clearing after they harvest the valuable timber. They burn it and then they grow their crops on it. So the government was set to license 100,000 of the last acres of 30 Hills Forest. They were planning to license it to a paper company that would come in and clear cut it and turn it into a pulp plantation. So all of the people living there, the wildlife, the forest carbon, the biodiversity would be lost or forced out. About 10 years ago, WF decided to try something we've never done before. We competed against international paper companies, and we applied for a license from the government, just like a paper company would, to operate it as a commercial concession. Except we got it rezoned from a logging concession to a new kind of concession called an ecosystem restoration concession. This allows us to focus on restoring the forest rather than logging it. Then we teamed up with two partners on the ground to found a commercial company. We called it ABT, which in Indonesian stands for the 30 Hills Forest Company. And ABT runs the concession. They began operating it when we got the license in 2015. And this was the only way we could find to save this forest. Next slide, please. Now, the overall 30 Hills landscape has something that there isn't much left of in Sumatra, and that is flat lowland rainforest. This flat land is highly coveted for agriculture and palm oil cultivation, and there's a lot of pressures on the landscape. It's also the favored habitat of Sumatran elephants, who tend to avoid hilly terrain. So you can see that big block of national park there. Well, it's all hills, and the elephants don't like to go up and down hills. So they're all down in the lowland part that wasn't protected. And so the competition for these lowland forests can be fierce, and the wildlife rarely wins these battles. So you see those two blocks called Block 1 and 2 under the national park. They're not connected to each other, but they serve as a really important buffer zone to protect the park from encroachment and other activities and poachers coming in. So we went the route of working to get those blocks declared a single ecosystem restoration concession and then running it like a commercial operation as the only way to save them from being turned into pulp plantations. They total around 100,000 acres. And for context, that's about double the geographic size of Washington, D.C. So this has been a bold and risky and largely untested undertaking, but there's no doubt that the forest and the wildlife would be gone now if we hadn't taken this route. Next slide, please, Alexander. Now, WF is quite good at conservation. Not many of us, however, have run a business before. But here we were in 2015. We got the license to manage the forest. We're starting up a forestry company and having to operate it without the usual profit center that a forestry company would have, which is logging. So how do you operate a commercial company without extracting timber like a traditional company would? And remember, this is something where, because it's a for-profit entity, the government expects us to pay taxes and employ local people. So this is where the really innovative stuff comes in. We have a 60-year lease on this forest, and we need to become a self-sufficient operation. So we turn to what we have in abundance here. And as Alexander mentioned, the forest is really full of valuable non-timber forest products. So the medicinal plants, there's rubber, honey, herbs and spices. You've got things like turmeric and cardamom growing here, resins and dyes. So ABT set out to create a sustainable business model that accesses global markets for local people and local products to provide alternatives to destructive activities like deforestation. So we ensure the products are sustainable and forest friendly. Then we ensure they are good quality and we look for global buyers. Next slide. And the local communities have been harvesting these things for generations, but they rarely have access to outside markets to generate decent income. So ABT provides technical assistance, infrastructure, investments, training to increase their incomes. And we promise the communities higher prices for their products if they follow sustainable practices and halt deforestation. And in turn, this builds community buy-in for protecting the forest because they see greater value in it. We've helped launch women's farmer groups, for instance, who are tackling food insecurity in their communities by creating community enterprises like raising livestock and vegetables and creating their own retail products from the forest like candy, bamboo shoots, turmeric powder. And for some of these women, this is the first time they've ever earned their own income. We're also providing healthcare, solar panels, fresh water sources, and educational support to the communities. Next slide. Something this innovative and challenging requires a lot of partners, and we've had a wide variety of supporters, from private individuals to government agencies to corporate partners. And the one thing they have in common is they believe in this kind of outside the box market-based conservation approach. And ABT has not yet turned a profit, so it still needs this donor support. So that's the background of our company. And now I'm going to turn it back to Alexander, who's going to give you a closer look at the actual on-the-ground efforts in 30 Hills.
Thanks, Jan. So here are a few photos of some of the ABT team. ABT really wouldn't be what it is without the incredible people driving this work. This is a team that demonstrates remarkable adaptability and resilience, and who are committed to the mission of protecting this forest while managing many obstacles and challenges upon the doorstep of the concession. Now we want to take you on a bit of a virtual trip to 30 Hills to try as best as we can through our computers and phones to immerse you a bit in what it's like being in 30 Hills and how ABT operates there and the work that's being done on the ground in this forest with these communities. So first of all, you have to drive for hours from the nearest city just to get here. Along the way out of the city, as you drive past many brightly painted houses, you start to see rubber plantations. You then see a sea of palm oil trees along the hillsides. Logging and timber trucks drive by past now flat ground and cleared forests. And then as you get increasingly more remote, driving literally into the heart of the jungle, the road starts to change as the terrain you start to cross turns to deep, thick carpets of mud, which really aren't streets anymore or developed land. And you increasingly become aware of how much deeper into the rainforest you're going as the land becomes wilder. So determination and perseverance and teamwork really become your best friend when getting stuck in the mud as it's raining down on you becomes a common occurrence. And this is quite often what you might look like, that state of that car on the other end of it all. But then after it all, you arrive at ABT's base camp of operations in the field, where a team consisting of community engagers, researchers, healthcare staff, and more reside here full time. These facilities complement the headquarters of ABT, which are based back in the city. And ABT has 2 camps, one per each block of the concession. So if you remember that photo, that map that Jan was showing, the 2 blocks, block 1 and 2, there's one each. And the photo that you see here is in block 1, where the majority of ABT's work to date has focused. And as per tradition, whenever a new visitor comes to visit the 30 Hills Forest, a tree is planted in their name so that they too become a part of the forest, leaving a part of themselves behind. I had the tremendous honor to plant a durian tree in my name when I visited 30 Hills for the first time in October 2022. And here you can see a few other of WWF staff and colleagues joining in the ceremony, as it was their first time as well. Everywhere you look, you see green on green on green. This forest is truly worthy of being called an Emerald City. It's vibrant, it's noisy, it is very much alive. And while most companies in the area work to make money from the clearing of these very forests, ABT works to demonstrate the financial benefits of protecting and restoring these forests. ABT's forest patrol teams and community efforts have managed to cut the annual deforestation rate by over 90% within the concession. Reforestation of degraded and deforested areas has begun to restore tree cover through work with the local Talangmamak villagers, using the resources from 2 nurseries in the area. And if you remember the couple photos on Jan's earlier slide, those are the nurseries that I'm mentioning. And if you look closely as you walk through the forest, the signs of wildlife are everywhere. It also would behoove you to look closely where you walk and place your hands, because leeches are a common frequenter along the trail, as they are attracted to your body heat, though they are quite harmless. But for example, as you can see in these photos, it's quite common to see elephant footprints. The photo on the left is actually of a tree trunk that we had used as a small branch when we walked through the forest one day, only to then find it broken the next day by an apparent elephant that had come through. And the footprint in the puddle, just right there in the center of the photo, was a bit of a giveaway of what had happened. But as marvelous as these encounters are, wildlife in Sumatra are hurting. ABT and its 3 conservation organization founders, WWF and the Frankfurt Zoological Society and the Orangutan Project, continue to collaborate to tackle issues and threats these animals face. And 30 Hills is interestingly home to one of only 2 reintroduction sites for Sumatran orangutans, which our partners, the Frankfurt Zoological Society and the Orangutan Project, operate. From ongoing research studies and surveys in the forest of the wildlife, we can continue to find how biodiverse this place is, as evidenced by these few camera trap photos that you see in front of you right now. Camera traps are, they're essentially cameras that are set up in the forest in strategic locations that are camouflaged and then triggered to snap a photo or video when it senses the movement of an animal pass by. And then scientists are able to extract that data and analyze that footage. Our survey teams have found tigers, elephants, macaques, which are these types of monkey that you see on that photo on the left. They found pangolins, clouded leopards, among many other species. Monitoring and protecting critically endangered species is an essential part of ecosystem restoration. Doing studies like this bring us closer to wildlife. They provide a window into the secret lives they lead, and they reveal the hidden wonder of nature all around us. ABT's mission is simple: create viable and sustainable alternatives to deforestation-based options. And over the past few years, ABT has worked with the local people to find the most promising commodities that would generate enough income to cover the costs, ensure profit, and have minimum environmental impact, and thus support their livelihoods, a few of which Jan had mentioned earlier. And so one such way includes helping the Talang people expand their markets for their wild harvested honey and then provide income for villagers. But these honey collectors are not your average beekeepers. As you can see in that photo on the right, they use traditional methods to bravely climb 100-foot or higher trees to retrieve that honey high up in the canopy. They do this free form, no harness, no rope, just using a set of metal stakes to climb up this colossal tree. And so ABTs continue to work with the Talang to scale up their honey business and assist them with the marketing of their products. The people who live within and near the forest are our biggest partners. Protecting 30 Hills protects these people's traditional culture and their future. ABT provides social services for forest communities who often can't reach certain services many hours away. For example, in the Talang People's Village, education level goes up to just around elementary and low middle school level. So in order to continue schooling, and certainly for university studies, villagers have to leave. And that's where ABT has been able to come in to provide resources for the teachers. You can see them actually in that upper left photo. There are 2 in the village to help them carry out their work, and then for the students to learn with school supplies and create capacity for individuals to then leave the village and support themselves with housing, food, and fees if they so desire. ABT also supports providing a school lunch program for the elementary school. There's so much that they've been able to do to really create opportunity for these people, to really engage them in the process and create these partnerships that are built on trust and support that involves the community and efforts that protect the forest by not engaging in any activity that might harm it. Harini Kurnia is a medic and midwife working in 30 Hills. So nature is very much her hospital, you might say. Harini has been working with ABT for the past year to provide free healthcare to the Talang community, both at her clinic in the base camp and in their homes. She's the first healthcare worker to permanently live in this area. ABT has been partnering with the local government for the past 4 years to bring health services to the communities through monthly mobile clinics to combat a number of health issues that the community faces, from respiratory to dermatological issues to malaria. But Harini now has been able to provide permanent, consistent healthcare, and she has formed close bonds and relationships with the community. More than 1,200 patients received healthcare last year. She visits the community multiple times a week, often traveling on foot for at least 30 minutes from ABT's base camp to the village through those long stretches of mud, if you remember those from that earlier photo, and those unpaved trails to get to and from the community and her now newly built clinic at the base camp. And so over back to Jan to talk a little bit more about some of the key progress to date and key successes.
Thanks, Alexander. So we're in our almost 9th year on the ground here with this company and the work with the communities. So here's a bit of a summary of our progress to date. And it's important to stress that, the conventional wisdom is that you can't stop deforestation in Indonesia. It's a way of life. It's just, you're never going to be able to stop it. But ABT has shown that it can be done and that it can be a win-win for local communities who often turn to deforestation just to survive. It was really kind of a Wild West situation when we got the license for ABT in 2015. The forest had been abandoned as a concession for years and was unprotected. But our strategy of combining these community partnerships with also rigorous forest protection is really paying off. And the annual deforestation rate is down more than 90% since we took over. And there's still a lot of challenges and pressures on the forest, but the success on the deforestation front has allowed us to put more of our energy into efforts like reforestation and restoration and growing the community enterprises. And what's great about this is that we've combined the two, where it's the Talang community who is running one of the nurseries that grows the trees that we use to reforest. So they're earning money from this and then also helping to restore the forest for future generations. So it's come full circle in that way. And then saving this forest also, of course, is ensuring habitat for wildlife, because the wildlife of Sumatra, their plight is increasingly desperate, and so they need these refuges with large swaths of forests that they can continue to move through and migrate and breed and carry on viable long-term populations. And the local communities are benefiting. So we're supporting the schools, as you've heard, providing, sustainable livelihoods and income generation. And then many of these forest dwelling families are able to access healthcare for the first time. You saw the video of the roads. It can be hours and hours on foot or by motorbike for some of these forest dwelling communities to get out to the nearest clinic, even if they can access it and can afford to get there. It's just not realistic sometimes to think someone's going to walk 12 hours to get to the clinic. So for the first time, many of these families are able to get childhood inoculations for their babies and maternal health care. So it's really been amazing to see this. Next slide. And with all of our work, we are asked a lot what supporters can do to help beyond donating. And it can sometimes be hard to connect our work in faraway places to actions that folks sitting in North America can take. But to protect 30 Hills or any tropical landscape, we do have a few very tangible suggestions for you. First, look for the FSC logo on wood and paper products. This is the Forest Stewardship Council. They're an independent sustainability certification group that you can trust. If you see their logo on copy paper, toilet paper, furniture, and it says it's FSC certified, then that's your assurance the product comes from a sustainable source and it wasn't cut down illegally. It wasn't from some kind of untraceable forestry operation. And if you're looking for, say, napkins and you can't find FSC certified ones, then opt for 100% recycled. Also, you can look for certified palm oil. Now, this one's harder to find, but the more that consumers are asking for this, the more retailers will start paying attention to their sourcing. And this is the same for other products. Ask about sourcing of something you're looking to buy and show companies that their customers really care about sustainability. Now, if you're a coffee drinker, it's a little easier. There are multiple ways that you can be looking for certified coffee. So it's either fair trade, organic, or shade grown that you want to look for, because a lot of our coffee supply is grown in what was once tropical forest, and you want to look for coffee that's grown under shade so that there's still some forest there. And finally, cut down on food waste. This one's a bit surprising, but food production is the largest driver of tropical deforestation globally. So reducing food waste can really add up. Plus it saves money, so it's a win-win. Next slide. And finally, we want to leave you with a little treat from one of our camera traps last year. We hide these in the jungle to help us count and monitor wildlife. And so this was a special video from one of those camera trap surveys. So as you can imagine, we were super excited to find those tiger cubs last year. So proof of breeding inside the concession, and that was a great find. So we've wrapped up a bit early, but hopefully that leaves time for questions. So we want to thank you. Maybe we'll come back on video and take some questions from folks.
All right, thank you both so much. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Can you tell us again what ABT stands for?
Sure, it's Alam Bukit Tikapulu in Indonesian, which means 30 Hills Forest Company. So that's why we stick with ABT. It's easier to say, but it's Alam Bukit Tikapulu.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
So where did the people of Sumatra come from a century ago?
The Talang Mamak, you mean? I'm guessing this means the indigenous people. So they have been in this part of central Sumatra for generations, and this has always been traditionally forests for them. And they have settled inside the boundaries of the concession. The government has built them a village, and there's the school there. So there's the Talang Mamak, who we have formal partnerships with and work very well together. There's also another group of indigenous people, the Orangutans, who also have traditionally always been in central Sumatra. They migrate. Different times of the year, they'll be in a different part of the forest following, say, fish or fruiting trees, things like that. We also have good relations with them. They prefer to not engage so much with sort of modern culture. They're not like the Amazon tribes that are, completely untouched, but they're like to stay on their own, and they're really struggling to keep their traditions alive. So we will see them sometimes when they're migrating through the forest, but they're having to live sometimes in palm oil plantations because their forest is disappearing. So we're working really hard to make sure that the concession where we are is very hospitable to them, but they've been there traditionally for generations.
So what is the length of the concession, and will it be up for auction again?
So we have a 60-year license, and we have an option to extend it for 30 years after that. So we're hoping for at least 90 years. This is protected. And it is 100,000 acres approximately, but it's in those two blocks. And in between it is Michelin Tire. You probably have heard of Michelin. They have a rubber plantation there, and they have committed to keeping a strip of land that connects our two blocks of forest. They've committed to keep it as a wildlife corridor, so that will allow the elephants to migrate back and forth, because elephants move a lot. They don't stay in one place. They also follow fruiting trees and have sort of a annual migration pattern. And they're getting, more and more in Sumatra and other places, getting harassed and chased off of, nobody wants them on their rubber plantation or their palm oil plantation because they are quite destructive. So they need these refuges. And so that's why we're really trying to map out the wildlife movements so that we know which parts really need to be protected the most.
Great, thank you for addressing that. So are there any plans to potentially have ecotourism at the site?
Maybe Alexander wants to talk about how easy it is to get there, and if he thinks the ecotourists would want to go.
I think, yeah. Well, I mean, I would say once you get there, it is totally worth it. So I highly recommend it. But yes, it is quite the trek. So we hope to give you a little bit of a taste of the difficulties of that. But I believe the team has been thinking about that already. Getting a little bit of an echo on my side, have been looking into that as an option just because of how unique of a place and its rich resources. So they are piloting that, but the obvious challenges and struggles with that are just how to do that sustainably and cost effectively when you don't have the best infrastructure at your disposal. But it's definitely a great idea.
Is selling carbon credits something that's part of the economical plan for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have actually done a lot of research into, the value, the economic value of the forest carbon, and it is quite significant there. WF has some pretty clear policies in place about carbon credits, because we want to make sure that companies are actually reducing their carbon output before they sort of offset with credits. But it is something, definitely, it can be one of our most valuable assets. We just need to find the right way to use that. But we've got a lot of interest from companies who come to us, and because they know we're sitting on a lot of forest carbon. So more to come on that one, but it's definitely one of the options for revenue stream.
Great, thank you for that. So what is the total acreage of your forest for the 30 Hills project?
It's almost 100,000 acres, which is like 38,000 hectares. Yep. And like I said, it's to put that in context, it's about double the size of Washington, D.C. geographically. We use that because we're from D.C. I don't know if other people can picture that, but it's a pretty good size. It's a pretty good size chunk of forest for sure.
So why not build paved roads for easy access and to save on travel time and safety?
I'm sure Alexander was thinking that too when he was stuck in the mud there. And it's a great question. We go back and forth on that a lot, because it would make it easier to get there, and it would make it easier to get some of these like products out of the forest. But here's the challenge: whenever you have good forest somewhere, it opens it up. It opens up the forest to poachers and illegal loggers and encroachers. The roads just can be very dangerous to a forest. So we are struggling with how do we make it accessible and safe for like our staff without making it overly inviting to people we don't want in the forest. So we probably will be doing some kind of maybe paved motorbike trail, at least so we can get supplies in and out, and the Telling Mama can get out for, if they need to get, like the hospital or something like that. But we don't want to make it so accessible that we're then fighting to keep unwanted people out of the forest. So it's a real balance on road building, and we've had a lot of discussions about that for sure.
Great, thank you. So is there work being done, such as composting, to improve the soil that it's already being used for growing food?
Alexander, you want to talk about the little community garden at the school, maybe?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is an area of work that they've been working on with the community, and looking into regenerative agriculture practices and just different ways that they can get the most out of their soil and tend to the soil. So they actually have a pilot, a garden next to their school, kind of in the center of their town, where they're starting to pilot a lot of that composting, recycling, regenerative ag practices, so that they can grow their own products near the forest, but outside, not having to go directly into the forest to extract these, but grow them in the most sustainable and effective way.
Excellent, thank you. So I've had a couple of questions about palm oil. Why would I want palm oil, and aren't there better alternatives to palm oil, and why is it still being made?
So palm oil is a really, I think, popular ingredient for like food manufacturers, because it's cheap and it makes like the cream in an Oreo really creamy, and it's affordable. And there's nothing inherently like evil about palm oil. It's just the problem is that where it's grown in these places, it's often, fabulous tropical forests are cut down so that they can grow the palm oil. And so that's the problem. And so when you can get certified palm oil that hasn't come from clearing tropical forest is what we're trying to promote, certified palm oil, for that reason. But it's something where it's a very cheap cooking oil for huge parts of Asia. So it's affordable for poor people. It has lifted a lot of people out of poverty in Indonesia and Malaysia. They're growing, these smallholders who have a few hectares of palm oil. It's very easy to grow. It doesn't require a lot of labor. So there are reasons that palm oil has kind of taken over the world in a lot of ways. The problem is if it's cutting down tropical rainforests, we need to shift it to degraded land and to places that were already being used for other kinds of agriculture. But it's one of those things, like, it would be very hard to live your life without palm oil unless you're growing your own food. It's sort of like saying I want to give up plastic. It would be very hard to do. And some people have done it, and they'll write a book about it because it is so challenging. But start looking at your everyday products in your pantry, or like your lotions, your lipstick, anything like that, and you're going to find palm oil in so many products in your house. And that's why we need to create demand for certified palm oil.
Thank you so much for addressing that. So is buying out a portion of the rubber concessions part of WWF's long-term plan?
Buying out, the one from Michelin, we would rather partner with them and try to get them to provide part of their concession for this, because this, as you probably have sensed from this presentation, it's a big lift to do this. It's challenging. We want to make sure we're getting this one right before we expand. So working with partners to get them to also commit to part of their concession for the wildlife is probably going to be a lot easier than trying to buy them out. Because, if they can be a good partner and also be focused on sustainable rubber, it could also be a win-win for us and the wildlife and the local people.
So are there volunteer opportunities at 30 Hills?
It's a bit of a challenge if you are a Westerner, to get a visa to go there. So I'd love to say yes, and there are some interesting research opportunities. I mean, there's so much biodiversity there that hasn't been studied. We'd love to get somebody in who could start doing a survey of all the frog species there, the snakes and medicinal plants, things like that. We have a lot of the indigenous knowledge that we base sort of our understanding of the biodiversity on. And it would be great to have somebody who could come in and interview the indigenous communities and then also do some studies in the forest. But right now we're not sort of equipped for some of the volunteer opportunities that you can have in other places, just because of the visa issue and then the challenges of the infrastructure there. But we'd love to say yes.
Yeah, I'll add on to that, Jen, just especially for folks who live miles away and across the ocean, as we do, or I'm going to assume, maybe everyone on this call does. I'd say even just, 30 Hills needs a lot more PR and communication and spreading the word. I didn't know about its existence until I joined the team that I'm on, WWF, but it's such an incredible little emerald isle, but that not a lot of people know about. So I would say even just using your voice to spread the word about it, talk about it, educate people about it, learn what you can about it, and in your own communities and social networks, and just talking more about these issues, looking for the types of products Jan was outlining, certified products, sustainable products. I think you're already, as a way, a volunteering your time and effort to helping places like this.
So can you talk about what the future looks like and what it will mean for the local community and the forest?
Yeah, you want to start on that one, Alexander, or want me to?
I mean, the hope is, the business plan is largely built on protecting and preventing further forest clearing. So the hope in the future is that it will become a self-sustaining business. Once we get past, those years of the license building out this business, it's going to be a self-sustaining, profitable business that can really show that you can have a business that is not built on deforestation-based approaches and products, and you can have a sustainable future and type of business that is built on protecting the forest. So the hope and the vision is that more forest is restored, more is prevented from clearing, the community is that much more even integrated into the practices of the company, and that it is a thriving place. But those challenges, I think, will probably always be present, or certainly present for a long time, just preventing further encroachment, illegal activity. So really the frontline workers of the company and the project are the patrol teams. So there always need to be that element, but the hope is that maybe not so much as it is now. And then we have a system that really supports having entities like this, and there's more like them around Sumatra and the country.
Yeah, and I just add too, so some of the community enterprises that are pretty small scale right now that we hope get built up over time. And we've done a business plan with outside consultants on this, but we're trying to get FSC certification ourselves for the rubber. And then we can guarantee that it's sustainable and it's benefiting the local communities. And there is such a demand now globally for sustainable natural rubber that I don't think we're going to have any problem selling as much rubber as we can produce to like tire manufacturers, for instance. The wild honey community enterprise is very small scale right now, but it is some of the best tasting honey that you will ever have tasted because it comes from wild bees in the forest. It's just amazing. And so we're working to market this, so it's not just the honey, but the story behind it, that you're benefiting this place. So we've got that, and we're also doing a pilot to cultivate vanilla, which they don't traditionally grow there, but the tropical environment's suitable for vanilla growing. It's very labor intensive, and so we're trying to get a vanilla company to come in and help train the local people. But it's so valuable. I mean, as you know, if you buy pure vanilla extract, it's really pricey. And there's a reason for that, because it's very hard to grow good quality vanilla. But that's something we think that we could really get to take off. And it would benefit the local people who are growing it. And then ABT with the value added processing and finding a global market would also be able to make money off that. And again, win-win for everybody. So those are our big focuses, is the rubber, the honey, and the vanilla right now.
Great. Thank you so much for answering some questions for us. Unfortunately, that will be the last one that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you guys for some closing comments.
Well, we just want to thank you all for your attention. As you can see, we love to talk about this project. It really is so exciting, and it's so different from our traditional conservation work. I think you can find more information at worldwildlife.org, and maybe Alexander will want to talk about what he coincidentally was also working on this week.
I know, it's perfect timing. Well, I hope you've fallen in love with the place just a little bit as much as we have, and hopefully what will help foster that more is if you check out the World Wildlife Instagram account. I was very lucky to take over our account yesterday and go all in on 30 Hills and really go more in depth on the conservation work that we're doing here on the ground, and a lot more visuals and just a closer look at the people behind the work and what's being done there. So I encourage you to check it out.
Jan, Alexander, thank you both so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.